If you're a dungeon master, you are probably always wondering how you can get better at your craft and how you can tell better stories that engage your players. So today we're going to look at how dungeon masters can tell better stories. But first, before we dive in, there are just a couple critical points to remember. First off, that the dungeon master is not the only storyteller at the table, right? Our players are storytellers as well, and we are going to come together as a group and to tell this story collaboratively, right? And that is a very important point to remember, that our players are storytellers as well. We as dungeon masters, of course, are storytellers, but we are coming together as a group and telling a group story. Very important to always keep that in mind. It is also important to remember that it is not the sole responsibility of the dungeon master to make sure that everybody is having fun at the table. Players are responsible for that as well. If we are telling a story as a group, we are all then responsible and have a part to play in to make sure that everybody is having fun at the table. So as a dungeon master, take a little bit of that pressure off of yourself. Yeah, you want to make sure people have fun at your table, but your players should be doing that as well. And so players, make sure you're trying to do your part so that everybody can have fun at the table. So those are two keys, right? Dungeon Master is not the only storyteller at the table, and it is not the sole responsibility of the Dungeon Master to make sure everybody is having fun. We are telling a story as a group, and we're trying to all have fun as a group. But here are a few ways that dungeon masters can tell better stories. All right, first thing we can do as a dungeon master, we can study stories. Now, I know you have a lot on your plate. I'm not telling you to add something else to your already busy schedule. I get it. You have family, you have responsibilities, work, all kinds of things. I get it. I am not telling you to add anything else to your life to make it crazy. But when we study stories, we can do this quite simply, right? I imagine that we are all reading books, watching TV shows, and watching movies or listening to some kind of stories in audio form. If we are doing that, which I am sure everybody who is watching this video does, when we are listening to those things, when we are reading those books, when we are watching those movies, when we are watching those TV shows, start to ask yourself questions about how the story is being told. Ask yourself, why does this scene come after that last scene? What is this character doing? What is this character trying to overcome? Who is this character? How are they involved in the story? Are they the protagonist? Are they the antagonist? Are they a supporting character? Are they the villain? Who are they? Just start asking your questions about stories as you watch them, as you read them. Try to heighten your awareness to why things are happening and why they are occurring at certain places during the story. This will help you when you come to the table to run your D&D adventure or your D&D campaign. Because if you can just do this while kind of in the background, while you're just watching a movie, while you're watching a TV show, while you're reading a book, while you're listening to that audio drama on Spotify, whatever it is, you can start to just heighten your awareness to what stories are, how they are constructed, and this helps you immensely when you're running games. Now, the next one, in medias res, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but what this means is in the middle of things. All right, so this is another way that you can really engage your players and enhance their buy-in, if you will, of the game, right, is to start something right in the middle of things. This works really great at the beginning of a new campaign or the beginning of a new session. You can throw your players' characters right into the middle of some situation, whether it be combat, whether it be social, whether it be a puzzle. Just throw them right into the middle of it. And this cuts out all kinds of meeting each other and figuring out who's, how people know each other, how characters know each other. That cuts all of that stuff out and gets them right into a situation where they have to work together. So whether, like I said, whether it's combat, whether it is a social situation, whether it is a puzzle of some kind, put them right in the middle of a situation where they are forced to work together, and you will not regret it. It will tie the group together, and the engagement at the beginning of that first session will be enhanced, and that is exactly what you want, because sometimes it is hard to get off to a roll, especially if you're asking new players. You give some kind of amorphous situation. Oh, you're walking through the marketplace in the village. What do you do? And the player has no idea. The character is alone. There's nobody else, but there's 6 people sitting around the table wondering what's happening. A new player is going to be very stuck with that. So take your first session of your campaign, drop the characters right into the middle of a situation, and that will enhance your first session. Reactive DMing. This is when your players start acting and they start doing things and they start telling you things. You can just start reacting to that as the dungeon master, right? If your players say, oh, well, we're going to go to the tavern. Well, now you need a tavern. Just start reacting to that. Describe the tavern in some way, right? You just already know what you need next. Your players say, oh, well, we're going to take an overland journey. Well, now you can react to that and say, okay, well, they're going to go through a forest, they're going to go through a swamp, and you can start planning that journey. If your players say, hey, we're going to go talk to that innkeeper, well, now you know, right? You need an innkeeper. You can just start reacting to whatever they're doing and kind of following where they are going and just creating things and putting things right in front of them as they go. And now that leads right into complications. One thing when you're studying stories, right, you'll know that the protagonist has to overcome complications over and over and over and over again throughout the story until the climax, until they overcome that last great obstacle and then save the day, or whatever your heroes are doing, right? Or whatever the protagonist does in that story, right? But along the way, they face complications. Now, here is where we can get a little tripped up in tabletop role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons, right? Our players, their characters are the protagonists. So when a player acts, when a player makes a decision, when a player is controlling their character, they are trying to cut through complications as quickly as possible and get to the end as fast as they can. You, as the dungeon master, you are going to throw more and more complications in front of those characters so that they have to overcome those obstacles, right? You can think about this in terms of a movie. If M calls James Bond and says, James, there is a madman in Switzerland who is going to poison the world's water supply. We know his lair is located in Switzerland. We know that. Can you stop him? What prevents James Bond from just picking up his phone and calling the Swiss SWAT team to go in and take out the evil villain if you already know where his lair is in Switzerland? What prevents that? Well, complications in a story, right? That would be a terrible story if he could just resolve it with one telephone call, right? So what we need to do as a dungeon master, we need to put complications in front of our players, right? We need to complicate that situation. So when a group of Dungeons and Dragons characters are told, well, you need to go and locate the lost mine, you shouldn't be able just to head over to the local tavern, find a miner who used to work there, and figure it all out, right? You need to have a layer of complication upon layer of complication. So as a dungeon master, you are going to be a complication machine. So while you are reacting to what your players are doing and the decisions they are making, you are just looking for ways to put complications in front of their characters at each step of the way, right? Say, for example, you describe a seaport and that the characters are walking down the quay and they are standing right there on the quay and they're walking along and you have something else in mind. But before you can say something, the rogue says, I want to sneak aboard one of the ships that are in the port. Well, you can shut the character down, right? You can shut the player down, or you can start reacting to what they're doing, but you're going to put complications in front of them, right? You're going to say, well, it's nighttime. It's very dangerous to slip on board a ship at nighttime because there are guards. If you want to swim, the water is murky and dark. You don't know what's underneath there. You're unfamiliar with these waters. On board the ship, there is a guard dog. In the ship's hold, there are crew members who are sleeping there, right? Like, you just start throwing complications in front of that rogue, and you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, making that player and that character overcome those obstacles. You just do that as much as you can. You're a complication machine when you're a dungeon master. Now, the cool option. The cool option is one of these things that it can be a little hard to define sometimes, but there kind of always comes a point during a session or during a campaign where you were like, if this happened, if that situation happened, that would be super cool. Maybe it doesn't make the most sense in the world. Maybe it's a little strange. Maybe you weren't thinking about going that way, but you'll come across a situation and you'll say, man, that is really cool if that would happen. Well, then make that happen. Make the cool option. Always take the cool option, even if you were planning something else, even if you were doing something else. If your player comes up with an awesome idea, if circumstances are kind of aligning and there is a possibility of just some incredible thing happening, if you just think, man, that would be so cool if that happened, go for that. Let that happen. Always embrace the cool option. As a dungeon master, we want to tell great stories. Those are just some ways that can help you out that I have learned over my years of running D&D and other role-playing games. If you have any questions, you can drop those in the comments below. I also create DM resource books. You can find those at dicegeeks.com. I also have long-form content in the form of a podcast, which you can find here on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Dice Geeks, all one word.